Here's a question for you. What do salmon, cows, and the Queen all have in common? Let me tell you, they are all involved in some truly bizarre laws right here in Scotland. And in today's episode, we'll be talking all about those weird Scottish laws. That's coming right up. Hello folks, how are you doing? Welcome to today's episode of the vlog. My name is Shaun and I'm a YouTuber from Edinburgh in Scotland. Right here on my channel I talk all about Scottish culture. Thank you so much everybody for joining me on this channel. It's great to have you here. And if you're new, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because then you won't find out about Scottish laws if you're not subscribed. I might just not talk about them. Are you subscribed? Thought you would. Thanks for joining the club. It's great to have you on board. Now, laws in Scotland. We have one of the oldest law systems in the world right here in Scotland. Some of the first people in the world who designed modern law systems did it right here in Scotland. But we do have some absolutely truly bizarre laws in Scotland. And in fact, you might not know this, but most countries have them. They are all laws that existed hundreds of years ago, and for whatever reason they slipped through the process of modernising over the years and they still exist. And I thought that would be an interesting thing to talk about in today's video. And I'll be saving the best ones to last, so don't you guys go anywhere until we reach the top 3, 2, 1, because there are some absolute belters. Alright, let's talk about first of all libraries, okay? An innocent space. And gambling. Gambling is something that is legal in some places, not in others. In Scotland we're allowed gambling, but not in a library. Very specifically, in libraries in Scotland, gambling is illegal. So imagine this, right? You're in the library doing your studies for university or whatever you do in a library, in a public library, right? A lot of people go there for universities and I think, hang on a wee minute, I'm just going to take a break to check the football scores because I've got a bet on 365.com or whatever those websites are. Paddy Power. I've put a wee bet on Paddy Power, I'm going to check my results. Technically, if you check those results while in the library, while studying on a wee break, you'll be breaking the law. And this boils down from the Libraries Offences Act, enacted in 1889, so a very long time ago, over 100 years ago, this was put in place. Presumably there were a lot of rowdy gamblers in our libraries all those years ago. I don't really know, but that's where it stemmed from. But this law actually covers more than just gambling. It is also an offence to use obscene or offensive language inside a library in Scotland. And if you broke this law, you could be fined 40 shillings back in the day. About £700 in today's money. Number 2, this is irony in action. In Scotland, it is illegal to allow anybody into your pub if that person is under the influence of alcohol. If you think about it, it's bizarre. Most people go to the pub to get drunk. Most people go to pubs in Scotland, usually visiting more than 1 or 2 in a night. Certainly when I've been out here in Edinburgh, we generally don't stick to 1. So most pubs in Edinburgh, Scotland in general, if people come through the door, it is more than likely that those people have been to other pubs, other establishments, before they visited any others. It's a bizarre concept. You're not allowed to let people into your pub who are drunk, basically. And it does seem strange, but actually it's very, very common to see this law actually playing out. Because here in Scotland, I don't know what it's like where you're from, right? Here in Scotland, if you go to a very late hours pub, like a nightclub, pub/club, you'll always find bouncers on the door, even pubs, right? You'll find bouncers on the door, the security guards, and they often ask you a few questions as you come in, and a lot of times you will not be allowed in that pub. I mean, a lot of the times they judge that based on anything, just because they don't like the look of you or whatever. They don't actually breathalyze everybody if they're coming in the door, but actually what they're trying to work out is if you're drunk or not. Because if you are, you're not allowed into that pub. It's against the law in Scotland. Number 3, here's a bizarre one for you, right? Mannequins. You know the mannequins you get in the shops as you're going around. You know those dolls that are dressed up with clothes on so that you can see what it looks like. It is illegal in Scotland for a child under the age of 10 to see a mannequin that is undressed, a naked mannequin. And this all stems from a law which aims to prevent the corruption of youth in Scotland. I guess it would be the shop owner that would be charged. But anyway, I think this law is broken all the time because I have been out into the shops in Princes Street in Edinburgh, for example, and you see lots of mannequins that are naked from time to time, you know, when they're kind of changing them. And there's lots of kids in the store, so if they say the mannequin undressed, that is against the law, not allowed. I don't know what the punishment for that would be. Banned from using mannequins in your store for the next 5 years or something, I don't know. Number 4. This law and the one after it are not actually Scottish laws, but they relate to Scotland very deeply and are very, very funny. Okay, so I'm going to talk about them anyway. And in fact, this law that I'm going to tell you about right now was recently scrapped in 2003, right? But it's still very, very pertinent, very important to mention. Before 2003, which was just a few years ago, if you were in the city of York in England, right, in the north of England, there's this very pretty city called York. It was legal to murder a Scottish person. If you were in York, you saw a Scottish person, you would be allowed to murder them if and only if that Scotsman was carrying a bow and arrow. I find that absolutely hilarious, and I probably know exactly why that law existed. York was one of those cities in the north of England that was regularly targeted by Scottish troops in independence wars. I think William Wallace actually sacked the city of York, Robert the Bruce perhaps as well, and all the way up through the Jacobite uprising. I think Scottish people often attacked the city of York and took the castle, all that kind of stuff. So those laws would have been dated to those times, you know. Scottish person in the city of York became a suspicious character, in particular if they were carrying a bow and arrow. So they probably legislated back then, like the king would have said, right, too many Scottish people have come in, sneaked into York, all innocently, and then all of a sudden brought a bow and arrow out and took the whole city. No more. Any Scottish person carrying a bow and arrow must be immediately killed. So there you go. I'm upset actually that law has been repealed. You know why? Because if it wasn't repealed, I would be going out there tomorrow to a toy shop and buying a toy bow and arrow and carrying it around the city of York just to see what would happen. So potentially dangerous YouTube stunt, but I think it would be funny. Number 5, law number 5, also not Scotland but related to Scottish people, and it's also very related to that previous one we just talked about in York, because in Carlisle, this law still stands. In the far north of England, very close to the border of Scotland, Carlisle was the first English port of call that we would have went to attack, right? So they also had similar laws to York. And as I say, this law that I'm going to tell you about still actually stands. In Carlisle, until today, any Scottish person found wandering around can be whipped and jailed. I think I'm going to go down to Carlisle for a wee bit of a recce. Let's just see what happens. Anybody up for that? I'll just wear like a kilt and with like a big Scotland flag wrapped around me and just walk around Carlisle and see what happens. Number 6, and this is interesting for me in particular because I used to be a fisherman and I knew this law already, right? But in Scotland, it is illegal to fish for salmon and sea trout, in particular in Scotland, on a Sunday. You can fish for anything else, you just cannot fish for salmon and sea trout. And this harks back to kind of religious laws because Sunday is the Sabbath, the day that everybody goes to church, so it was a day that you were not allowed to catch salmon. Number 7, right? You guys might know this. We have actually got 2 flags that represent Scotland. We've got the main flag, the saltire, the blue with the white cross across it. That is the main flag of Scotland, but we also have another flag. It is yellow with a red lion rampant. I've put it in this video. I am currently breaking the law. The lion rampant is significant because it represents the royal family when they're in Scotland. It actually legally belongs to the Queen. And according to an Act of Parliament passed in 1672, it is an offence to fly this flag unless on a royal residence or without the explicit permission of the royal family. Today it is flown at Balmoral Castle in Scotland and also Holyrood Palace when the Queen is in residence. But there you go, that yellow flag that also represents Scotland. The lion rampant is actually the royal family's flag of Scotland and belongs to them apparently, and we can't use it. If a whale washes up on a beach in Scotland, it automatically becomes the property of the monarchy. The head becomes the property of the king, the tail becomes the property of the queen. There is no king in the United Kingdom at the moment. We've got the Duke of Edinburgh, the queen's husband, and then the queen herself. So presumably she would just own the whole entire whale. Whales are technically classified as a royal fish. I find that bizarre because it's not a fish, it's a bloomin', what is it? A mammal. The exact same law applies to sturgeon. You know that fish that caviar eggs come from? So sturgeon is also a property of the Queen, any sturgeon that lands up on British shores. And any sturgeon accidentally caught by an angler, for example, must be offered to the Queen. And many people who have actually caught sturgeon accidentally have offered those fish, the sturgeon, to the Queen. Usually she rejects it. And actually there was a case of a man, I think it was in Wales, a few years ago, who caught sturgeon on a beach and offered it to the Queen. I'm thinking to myself, how do you get in touch with the Queen saying that you've got a sturgeon and you'd like to offer it to her? I mean, she doesn't really have a hotline. It's not like we have her WhatsApp number. Just get out my phone. The Queen. Hello there. I'm actually after Lizzie. Aye, the Queen. Can you tell her I've not got all day? Hello, your Madge. How's it going? Listen, I've got this sturgeon here on the beach, and by law I have to offer it to you. Do you want it? Alright, okay. I'll be around Buckingham Palace by noon. So sturgeon, okay, you can see the point. It's a fish. They do get pretty big, but not so big that it's not that difficult to kind of handle and take it to the Queen. But a whale, let's just say a whale washed up on the beach. Technically that belongs to the Queen. It must be delivered to the Queen immediately. What is the Queen going to do with it? I don't think the Queen has like a whale storage area in the gardens of Buckingham Palace or Holyrood House. Or maybe she does. I did say, guys, I was going to be saving the best ones for last, and I think that last couple with the Queen have just been a bit hilarious and out there. But the next one, it's very funny, but it's also interesting, okay? And I think particularly for you guys in North America, you'll find this a bit confusing. Because I know in the United States of America, for example, private property very much must be respected, and if you were to trespass, it could lead you into all sorts of problems. And I think even legally you could be shot for trespassing in America, right? Not so in Scotland. We actually have very good roaming rights, meaning that everybody in Scotland is protected well on any land. And I think that's a great law, right? Because that means that any part of land in Scotland, nobody, no rich landlord can say, that is mine, you're not allowed to go there. Basically, you can roam anywhere in Scotland within reason. I love the roaming rights law because, like, let's face it, there are historic sites, there are mountains everywhere, and most of Scotland is taken up by people who own farms and stuff like that. So imagine if they just blocked access wholesale across Scotland, you wouldn't be able to go anywhere. So this law literally protects our rights as citizens to go and see Scotland. We have to be respectful, we have to, like, try and go around farm fields if we can, and if we have to go through them, we must open and close gates properly and not let animals out and not interfere with animals, stuff like that. We have to be respectful. We can't, like, take cars onto land and stuff like that. But we do have the right to roam. And further than that, okay? If a stranger were to knock on your door and ask you to go to the toilet here in Scotland, technically, according to the law, you must oblige. You cannot refuse somebody who knocks on your door in Scotland who wants a loo. You can't say, no, sorry, you're not allowed. This law apparently is actually enforceable and dates way back to the Scottish hospitality law, and it is actually used today, right? Because if you go in the Scottish Highlands and you're hill walking, there are a number of bothies set up. A bothy is basically like a very, very small house, but it's more like a shed that is a bit more fancy than a shed. You could sleep in it. They have beds, they have cookers and stuff. Bothies are set up by people to be used by anybody who needs them. If you're out in the hills and the weather gets really bad, for example, you can just go into a bothy, use the facilities, sign a wee note saying thanks to the owners, and off you go, right? But actually what these laws stem from is way back to the times of the clans, the Scottish clan systems. Usually when clans were travelling through lands, you know, they had a long way to go, and if the weather closed in on them, like it got snowy or something, you would usually have to ask the people who own the land that you come across, just saying, listen, can you put us up for a night? The weather's too bad for us to continue. And those laws have basically continued ever since. But I do find it weird that somebody could literally knock on my door right now and say, I need the toilet, let me in. To be honest with you guys, I think I would be more inclined to break the law. Don't show up here asking to use my loo. The last law I want to talk to you guys about, number 10, is a stoter. I think it's pretty much accepted all around the world that it is rightfully illegal to drink and drive, okay? You're not allowed to take control of a car and drive anywhere in the world, or most places in the world. It's sensible, right? But in Scotland, we take it a little bit step further. According to the Licensing Act Scotland, 1872, it is illegal to be in charge of a carriage, a horse, or a cow while under the influence of alcohol. I just think it's hilarious that you cannot be in charge of a cow. And it's actually pretty sensible, because a lot of times in Scotland, you'll be driving along the country roads, and in between farm fields, sometimes you have to open the gates and let cattle and stuff like cross the road, and all the traffic has to stop. Well, imagine the farmer was drunk out his face. Can you imagine the chaos that would cause? There would be cows literally everywhere. So there you go. A lot of them still actually apply and make sense today, but they were designed in older times when things were different. I would love to know what you think about them, and I would love to know some of the hilarious laws where you're from. In the comments down below, let me know. I will be talking about my own research I've done on some of your funny laws around the world, because there are some crackers. Please consider also supporting my content on Patreon from $1 a month. All the money goes towards helping me make this content. Thank you all so much for watching. It has been great to speak to you, and until the next adventure, I hope you have a good night, morning, evening, afternoon, or whatever time of day it is, wherever you are in the world. Take care.